Testing 1, 2. Testing 1, 2. Okay. Oh, that was fun. Hey, Charlotte. Thanks for following me all over. Oh, now I'm all pixelated. Oh, can't win. But we're here, at least. So I had to revert to an old camera because my new camera, YouTube did not like it. But that's all right. We're here now. Thanks for coming on over. Hey, Ching Long. I'm well, thank you. I am looking forward to speaking with you guys. I've been trying to stay out of your hair a little bit while Abby and Katie and Nick have been lecturing with you and really not steal their thunder. But it's high time that we started talking about research methods and, of course, about winding up the subject and preparing for the exam as well. So that is what I'd like to be doing with you today in the first of these streams. It's good to see we're starting to get some people coming back in now. So I think we've got a lot to talk about. I saw some questions starting to emerge in that last stream that just died, and I think I've already got a feeling on some trends, some things that are on people's minds. So that's good. We're still a few weeks out before the end of the semester. So we've got quite a while to go till our exam, don't we? They've scheduled our exam to be really late in the exam period. So of course you can find your exam details in your student portal. And they have scheduled the Mind Brain Behavior 2 exam for the 23rd of November for most people. And that's on a Monday, 23rd of November in the afternoon. So there's actually just a little over a month between now and when we sit the exam. And of course, I'll keep checking in with you every week from here on through to talk about research methods. And also the exam generally. So we've got a couple of things to talk about, don't we? One is the subject generally, and the other is research methods. Today is going to be more about research methods than anything else, but I might quickly just address some of the top questions that I can see popping up about the exam, and then we can get into research methods. So the exam is going to be online, multiple choice, open book, just like it was last time. Last semester, you'd recall that we had an open book exam in Mind, Brain, and Behavior 1. We're going to be doing that again. There is going to be a difference this time in that the university is managing when precisely we sit the exam, and it is going to be for most people on that 23rd of November day. That means that we don't have an entire week to sit the exam like we did last time. This time, everybody, for the most part, sits it at the same time. And that will be fine. So Nick and Abby and Katie and I are currently building the exam behind the scenes. Well, actually, we're building 2 exams. The first one is a practice exam. Do you remember, for those of you who did Mind, Brain, and Behavior 1, that we had a practice exam that was available, and it was made available to give you a sense of the flavor of the difficulty and the type of exam questions that were to come, and also what it is like to sit the exam online. As a reminder, the exam will be presented in Canvas as a Canvas quiz. So it's going to be just like completing any other quiz on Canvas. It's just that this is going to be your exam. And it is going to be open book. That means that you will be able to look at the course contents, at the lecture notes and lectures, research methods modules, practical class notes that are available and that you may have taken while you complete the exam. There's going to be 120 questions altogether. Again, exactly the same as the first semester exam. And these questions have got equal numbers coming from clinical, developmental, social, and personality, 25 questions coming from each of those topic areas. That brings us up to 100. And then the last 20 will be about research methods. So 120 questions in total, 3 hours to complete the exam, plus 15 minutes reading time. And for those of you who have got alternative exam arrangements, and maybe you're dealing with special circumstances that might impact your ability to sit the exam in the regular time frame, we'll be building into the settings of the exam special time limits for you, so that when you log into your specific quiz, you will have your bespoke, your custom time limit there waiting for you. So 120 questions altogether, all multiple choice, open book. You can look at the course content while you complete the exam. It's going to be a Turnitin quiz. You have to sit it in a single setting. So once you start, you have got 3 hours and 15 minutes reading time to complete. You can't go away and complete it another day. So that's a core difference between this and, well, last time you had to sit it in a single setting as well, but you could also do it at any time over a week. That's not the case this time. This time, everybody, for the most part, is sitting this on the 23rd of November. So that means that while you're sitting the exam, I'm going to be out here in cyberspace trying to get my camera to work and being on hand to help you if you have any problems. Help you with everything, of course, but the answers to the exam. So I will, in the coming days, release an announcement or two we've got scheduled with the particulars of the exam, with the details. And what you should expect is that, for example, with the clinical section of the exam, if we take that and as an example, I've got 25 questions to ask. I'm going to spread those reasonably evenly across across my lectures and the practical classes. So obviously I can let you know that I won't re-examine the content that we've assessed in the lab report too much. So you can take it for granted that I won't assess your in-depth knowledge of the Cozy Luck paper, for example. Whereas Nick, Katie, and Abby, of course, additionally assigned you a key reading through Peerwise. They, however, didn't have a lab report that really assessed your understanding of that key reading. So I'm not going to be too redundant there with my section. The others are more likely to ask you questions about that key reading that they assigned. So, if I had, 6 lectures over the course of the clinical section, even, if we just applied that math, we'd be thinking, almost sort of 4 questions coming from each lecture, and that probably sounds about right. Now, here is the other thing that I would point out. Not everybody will get the same set of questions. So for the first time in first year psychology, and Abby has done this previously in her second year developmental subject, for example, we're going to be creating what's called a question bank. And this is a question bank where there is, for example, behind the scenes right now, one of your tutors is working with me to write the research methods exam questions. And we're writing about double the number of questions that, excuse me, double the number of questions that will be presented to any given person. So we're writing about 50 questions. That means they go into a pool, into a bank, and every time a new student starts the exam, 20 research methods questions will be randomly selected from that bank of 50 questions. So everybody gets a slightly different exam, but the questions are all equivalent in terms of difficulty. It's a whole thing, trust me. It's quite time consuming, but it's really worth it. I think it makes for a very solid online examination framework. So I think that's everything that I need to tell you about the exam. The practice exam that I've been talking about, that will go live in SWOT-VAC week. So just like I did in first semester when I made that available in SWOT-VAC week, that will be available in SWOT-VAC week all the way up to when you sit the exam. You can go through it as many times as you like and rehearse it as many times as you like. I won't be giving the answers to that particular exam. It's just there to model the experience of sitting the exam. There are more questions, I think, coming from every component of the course. So I mentioned that one of your tutors is working with me right now, and I think I'm going to keep him anonymous, or her anonymous, or them anonymous. And I think they are out there right now. So hello to you, person who is helping me. And thank you again for helping me create these questions. And there's going to be more questions coming for you to rehearse with as well, in addition to the practice questions. And of course, there's Peerwise. And I noticed this afternoon, and Paul, I think it might have been a question from you. Well, first of all, let me say I've just discovered this afternoon that I thought I had an email setting on in Piazza where it would email me when somebody posted a question. Turns out that's not the case. So I've come in this afternoon and discovered a whole bunch of questions that I didn't know was there. One of them, I think, was from you, Paul, and it was a question about Peerwise and if it can be embedded in Canvas like Abby had done previously in another subject. And we do actually have that, but granted, it's in no way obvious now that I look at it. So I'll fix that up this afternoon. We'll make that more obvious. and that'll be helpful in attracting people to the wonderful thing that is Peerwise. A great way to learn is to make your own practice exam questions and to rehearse those with your colleagues. So that will be coming very shortly. And look, I think everyone, just to be really candid, the exam should not be a stressful one for you this semester, especially given the fact that, you know, you get to sit it in the comfort of your own house. You get to wear pants or not. That's up to you. If you want to go pantsless, then you go pantsless for the exam. All up to you. But you get to sit it in the comfort of your own house. You've got the lecture materials that you can refer to. You've got the notes that you can refer to. Relatively speaking, will have, I think, a low stress exam experience for Mind, Brain and Behavior 2. And just like the Mind, Brain and Behavior 1 exam, bring sexy time for our exam, says Charmaine. Indeed. What was I going to say? It's going to be fair. It's not going to be grueling. It's going to be fair. What you will discover, and those of you who've sat the Mind, Brain and Behavior 1 exam already know, that we prepare the exam questions in a way that is appropriate for online examination. And that includes encouraging a lot of critical thinking about the concepts, aspects of the exam, and maybe thinking about scenarios. Remember, in the research methods section of the Mind, Brain and Behavior 1 exam, I was quite commonly pitching you a scenario and then asking you about a specific topic and asking you to apply that to a given scenario. So, for example, let's throw a research methods question in here. So let's see. I've just launched the National Stigma Report Card. I don't know if you guys saw this in the news, but we finished the first survey and that's just been published. So if you go to nationalstigmareportcard.com.au, you'll find the new website that my team and I have built and all of the reports and whatnot. In this survey, I asked just under 2,000 Australians who live with complex mental health issues about their experiences of stigma and discrimination. Based on the results of the survey, Sane Australia and the government and other people are now going to implement measures to reduce stigma and discrimination. In 2 years' time, those nearly 2,000 people are going to come back and do the survey again. And I'm going to compare their levels of stigma and discrimination before this advocacy and after this advocacy. So my question for you is, what type of research design would you call this? You can answer in the chat section if you like. So I've measured them once. We've got an advocacy intervention and we're going to measure again in 2 years' time. Repeated measures. Yes. Fabulous. Well done. Excellent. That's great, team. Congratulations. Everybody's down on the research methods. That's great to see. That really is great to see because it's not a straightforward thing to pick up at first year. So I'm really proud of you. Well done. So repeated measures. That's right. It's the same group of people and we're going to measure them multiple times, actually. There will also be new people, but that's just a pragmatic side consideration. But there will be a group of people that we follow every 2 years for as long as we can have funding for the project, and measure change in response to the advocacy. So, say for example, I calculated their average score on a measure of stigma just recently, and then in 2 years' time, I calculated their average score on the same measure of stigma after the intervention had taken place. What type of statistical test do you think I could use? Could I bring to bear to determine if there's been any effects of the intervention, if stigma and discrimination may have decreased? Here you go. No one. I'll just put the link in the chat. So if you haven't seen the website yet, I've just posted the link there for you. Jamie's got it. Yeah, a t-test. What type of t-test? Yeah, repeated measures t-test. Nina's got it. Excellent. Bingo. So repeated measures would be the one to use. That's right. Because it's one group of people, isn't it? And we're testing it 2 times. So that's the repeated measures t-test paradigm. That's where that's appropriate. If we were instead, so let's say I took the group of people, I went to my website, I got the data, and I took the group of people who identified as having schizophrenia, and I took the group of people who identified as having borderline personality disorder, and I compared those 2 groups on a measure of stigma and discrimination. What t-test would I use then? So I'm just going to use their results from this first survey. Nina's all over it. Way to go, Nina. Yeah, Nina's got it. Independent groups t-test. That's right. Oh, look, I'm not pixelated. Deary me. Oh, there you go. It's a bit horrific, isn't it? You weren't prepared for my COVID hair and whatnot. This is what happens when you're locked in an office for 6 weeks writing a national stigma report card. Independent groups t-test. That's correct, because we're not testing at different times with one group. Instead, we're testing 2 different groups at one time. So we've got 2 independent groups, people with schizophrenia, people with borderline personality disorder, and we're comparing those 2 groups on a measure of stigma and discrimination. I've actually been doing that behind the scenes, actually, and for what it's worth, for your interest, it turns out that people with schizophrenia and people with borderline personality disorder experience stigma and discrimination more or less in different areas of life. So people with schizophrenia, for example, are much more, based on our findings, likely to experience problems around mass media. And people with BPD, more than any other clinical group that we looked at, were reporting stigma and discrimination in the mental health system. You might have seen an article I wrote about this recently too. Mamma mia! Don't leave us, Mamma mia! Hi, Nina. So Nina's got a great question. Will you need to conduct a t-test calculation on the exam? No, you will not need to calculate anything in the research methods component of the exam. Does that make you feel better? In the coming days, I've got a little video that I'm editing and I'll share with you, and an accompanying document which will show you how to do t-tests and correlations on your assignment data. And of course, I didn't ask you to do that for the lab report because I just wanted you to not stress out and to learn how to write a lab report. That was the ultimate goal. With that all said and done now, for your own skill acquisition, I've got a tidy, brief, little video and self-guided exercise that you can use along with the video. And in the coming week, you'll be able to play around with JASP, that statistical program that's free, and learn how to do an independent groups or repeated measures, t-test, and a correlation as well. So you'll have all of those skills under your belt. They're really, really easy. The important bit is that you understand what's going on. And then if you understand what's going on, then the rest is all downhill. So no calculations on the exam. Don't worry about that. Definitely not. The type of sort of scenario that I was giving to you there, describing a scenario and then asking you to apply your knowledge of research designs and their accompanying statistical tests, then that's very much the flavor of what you can expect from a reasonable proportion of the research methods questions. And one of the other things that, of course, we haven't talked about yet is correlations, and that's something that my little helper, who's out there, I think right now, is writing some questions on. And I've heard such wonderful feedback from your tutors about that last practical class where you guys were coming up with your own research projects and applying t-tests or correlations as well. And of course, where t-tests are all about group differences, correlations are about associations, aren't they? They're about relationships. And somebody actually emailed me a question about correlations ahead of this afternoon's consultation. Let me just find it here. In fact, I think I can even remember what it was, and it was from Jack. And Jack, that's right. So Jack was asking if we have a statistically significant correlation, does that mean that the relationship between two variables is really strong? Who knows the answer to that? So let me ask you that question. If we have a statistically significant relationship, does that necessarily mean that the relationship between two variables is strong? Yeah, that's right. Charmaine's got it. So, yeah, good, Rima. Oh, good. You guys are doing really well. That's right. So, the statistical significance, all this does is well, actually, let me ask you that. So, in the context of a correlation, everybody, statistical significance, what does it mean? If we do a Pearson's correlation and we look at your scores before and after the mind-brain behavior 2 clinical component of the course, those scores on the social distance scale, and we ask ourselves if scores at time 1 were related to scores at time 2. So, for example, people who had less stigma at time 1, were they also likely to have relatively less stigma at time 2? Let's say we did a Pearson's correlation there and we found a statistically significant result. What would that mean if we found that the result of our Pearson's had a significance level less than 0.05? What does this specifically, that significance level, mean, the p-value? Yeah, reject the null hypothesis. That's right. Yep. And so effectively what we're saying here is that the effect that we're seeing in this sample, based on the statistical analysis with the correlation, it's likely to be present in the population. So this isn't likely to be an anomaly. If we did find a statistically significant correlation in the sample, we'd expect to see that correlation in the population. That's right. It's not typical. We reject the null hypothesis. Good. All right. Excellent. So then what about I think we're on to the strength. So the statistical significance is telling us about whether or not the correlation's likely to hold in the population or just be observed in the sample. And you're interpreting that through the null hypothesis significance testing lens, which is perfect. Love it. Exactly what I'd like you to do. That's great. The strength, as I can see you discussing here in the chat window, that's right. That's measured on a scale from -1 to +1, where either -1 or +1 indicates a perfect correlation, with -1 indicating a negative correlation, whereas scores on one variable increase, scores on the other variable decrease. And positive correlation is, of course, whereas scores on one variable increase, scores on the other variable increase as well. Remember, correlation has always got just two variables that we're comparing at a time. And as we get closer to 1, we would say we've got stronger relationships, more of those, straight line diagonal relationships. But as we get closer to 0, then we're talking about no relationship. At 0, we're talking about no relationship. Nothing's going on. Osher hasn't handed out a rose. There is no relationship going on whatsoever. More often than not, we find the answer to be somewhere between those extremes. Depending on what we're looking at. But, sometimes when we are looking at, let me give you an example. Oh, okay. I've been doing truckloads of correlations lately, correlation-like analyses, as I have been testing the statistical makeup of the survey that we used for the National Stigma Report Card. So that survey had hundreds of questions, and those questions all fell into subscales, scales that looked at particular things. And I wanted to ask about a particular issue, and maybe I asked about that issue in 5 different ways, and I had 5 different questions that I theorized all asked about, for example, the fearful anticipation of discrimination in the mental health system. And then what I can do is have a look at how well scores on those questions correlate with each other. Do they correlate well? Theoretically, they should, because they should all be testing the same thing, roughly. If they correlate too strongly, however, like close to 1, I'd be concerned. I'd be concerned that I've got redundancy built into the scale. If the correlation is too close to 0, then I would be concerned that, this just is in no way measuring the one thing. This is measuring all different things. But if the scores are correlating at round about sort of minimum of 0.8, sort of 0.8 to 0.9 maximum in that range, I'm really happy. That's the sweet spot. Hi, Bellissimo. That is an interesting question. I don't. I have to. I have to be honest here, Bellissimo. I'm not sure what you're asking. This is the problem with stats, especially in the early years. It's it's a funny language to get a hold of. Timna, yes, this will be saved. This will be saved, and you can access it via the same link at any time. Okay, so we know with correlations, then we have got three important things that we need to remember. There's the strength, how close the correlation is to one or to -1 or to zero. There's the direction, which is tipping towards negative or positive, which will tell us about the nature of the relationship and whether or not in a positive relationship, two things increase at once, or in a negative relationship, one thing goes down as the other thing goes up, like a seesaw. And then there is, of course, the statistical significance, which is telling us whether or not this is likely to occur beyond your sample and into the population as well. Geordie, thank you for asking. How's my mental health? That's a very good question. So that's a good question for the month, isn't it? It's mental health month, I suppose. Mental health week seems to have expanded into mental health month. Pretty good at the moment, Geordie. Thank you very much for checking in. I'm feeling pretty happy right now. I'm busy, but getting that report card published was a major accomplishment. And if you take me back to about 3 weeks ago, then I was pretty stressed and tired, and working, 7 days a week and 17-hour days, and feeling a bit not well because of it. But touch wood, everything is back to normal, smooth sailing now, and that's really the flavor of work in academia. I know some of you are interested in becoming, an academic psychologist in the future, and it ebbs and flows. There's really busy times sometimes, and then there's other times when you've got the luxury of stopping and taking stock and catching up on things that you'd like to catch up on, and doing some reading and writing and thinking. Thinking is just such an important thing to do in academia, about your research work and about your teaching practice. Just taking time to think and reflect, really important stuff. Build it in. If you ever become academics in the future and you're involved in research, one thing that I hear people do quite a lot is actually schedule in time, an hour, for example, a week, to stop and think about their research findings, the data they've got, what it might mean, what they might be able to report to the general public in a publication about their findings that would be good to get out, and so forth. Thank you, Geordie. I hope you're all doing well as well. Of course, we've just had Mental Health Week. There's been lots of discussion around mental health. Again, I've tried to not inundate you with things in Mental Health Week. If you've watched Twitter, you have seen that there's been quite a bit of hype around the National Stigma Report Card, and I didn't want to throw that in your faces. I wanted you to enjoy your time with Nick. But there's all sorts of things going on this month around mental health. And I hope you're all doing well as well. And in fact, just this afternoon, I posted up on the Piazza discussion board again, when I realized it wasn't sending me emails, a response to a question around adjustment disorder, which is a really common experience in university students. And adjustment disorder is characterized by a mixture of signs and symptoms of anxiety and depression and distress that's generally a little bit disproportionate to the type of stress that would be caused by a certain event or a stressor. Very common when we've got big adjustments in our lives. And I don't know, but I suspect that adjustment disorder would be on the rise this year, probably around COVID and all of the stressors that people have had to deal with in lockdown, and potentially being separated from family, and not being able to do your usual things, get together with friends and socialize, and just be human the way that you were used to being human. And the university counseling and wellbeing services actually provide some really good resources around adjustment disorder. And, just like, my take generally on mental health, that, when we talk about mental health conditions like adjustment disorder, for example, I think we're really talking about continuums of experience where the threshold for clinical significance is not necessarily clear cut. We're talking about more or less, and we're talking about sort of issues really that can be more or less impactful, severe, frequent, etc., etc. So you can spread the word with your friends about. All right, let me copy this link here into the chat window. Wow, my internet is dying. The hamster needs to run quicker on the wheel. I tell you what's been great for my mental health lately, Schitt's Creek. I don't know if you guys watch Schitt's Creek, but after being apparently behind the times, I am binging Schitt's Creek at the moment. I'm obsessed with Moira Rose. I think she's the most fabulous thing. So that first link that I shared is some resources around adjustment specifically. And I think maybe that was the life transitions page. But if you go up one level, you'll see there's all sorts of resources that the counseling and psychological services offer around study-related issues. So really relevant as we move through to study time. There's guided meditations. There's all sorts of things that are really good for managing anxiety, depression, and so forth. Yeah, Schitt's Creek. Oh, poop indeed. I can't get over how Moira says Bebe. I can't do it right. But her whole pattern of speech is just, I think it's an incredible accomplishment for an actor to have done that. Hats off to that actor whose name I do not know. Adam, will you need to know all the notations? No, that's a good point, Adam. It'd be really nice if I gave you a list of statistical notations in the exam so that you could refer to that. Why don't I do that? That sounds like a nicer thing to do than asking you to remember it all. I really don't care if you remember what a little squiggly line means. It's the concept I'm really interested in. If you can remember the concept, yeah, there you go, Sonali. Then you'll probably just end up knowing what the symbol means anyway. But, a bit miserly, I think, to interrogate people's knowledge of what a particular symbol means. Is there a YouTube compilation of all the bears? Oh, well, dearie me, we'll have to get onto that. Yeah, absolutely. All right, so let me scroll up here and see what sorts of research methods questions we have. Hey, Chris, how are we meant to answer the complex quant multiple choice questions in the 1 minute we have, the scheduled 1 minute we have? You've got a little bit more than 1 minute. You've got about 1.5 minutes per question. In fact, you should have exactly 1.5 minutes. Yes, you've got 1.5 minutes per question. Tons of time. The question list that I've put out I will put a couple of those on the exam. Just a couple of the easier ones, shall we say, Paul. They are vaguely representative of what the exam will be. The exam questions are going to be easier. Keep an eye out for the practice questions that are going to come out very shortly, some additional ones, and they will give you a flavor of the difficulty level of the exam. Indeed, the Mind, Brain, and Behavior 1 exam, that's the flavor, that's the difficulty level of the Mind, Brain, Behavior 2 research methods. No more difficult. I'm not here to stress people out. Piece of cake. And you definitely won't be in a position where you need to worry about a question for 15 minutes. Indeed, if you do find yourself just being completely stumped by a question and you don't know what it is, I strongly encourage everybody not to worry about any given question for 15 minutes. Any particular question is worth less, is worth literally less than 1% of your exam grade, right? Because there's 120 questions. So if you find yourself just being stumped and you've got no clue, take a swing, have a guess, drop the pen, spin the pen, do whatever it is. Oh, we're doing it on a computer. Spin the mouse. I don't know. But make your best educated estimation of what the correct answer would be, but definitely don't spend 15 minutes on a question. Can you flag questions and go back to them? That's a very good question, Yomna. I don't know if that is possible in the Canvas quiz. What you could do is, have a book next to you where you keep or a Word document open, maybe, where you keep a list of questions you've got to go back to. You could do something like that. We are going to have the exam is a month away, and I'm now that everybody's sort of winding up their lecturing, I'll come back on stage and I'll shepherd you all the way through to the exam. So we've probably literally, got 5 or 6 or even more streams to go, I would say, before the exam. And what we'll start to do is start to talk about technique, start to think about how to approach study for the exam and the exam itself. And we could discuss study techniques, exam techniques, and for a lot of people who were in Mind, Brain, and Behavior 1, we might ask them for their advice about what they felt was helpful for them in preparing and sitting the Mind, Brain, and Behavior 1 online exam. Hi, Charmaine. Thanks for your question. Oh, I sort of sounded like Moira then, didn't I? Question. I have a question. To be more precise for a population, should there be a higher sample size or should there be more sample groups? Interesting. So the simple answer is that your first suggestion is correct. So central limit theorem, when we're thinking about central limit theorem, when we're thinking about the law of large numbers, when we're thinking about, brain, stick with me. Mama needs a coffee. What am I thinking about when I'm thinking about distributions of sample means? Generally speaking, we're thinking about larger samples giving us a more precise estimate of the population parameter. And this makes sense. It makes just, I think, logical, intuitive sense. Imagine that if we had a, let's say, mind, brain, and behavior one, two. Mind, brain, and behavior two. Everybody in mind, brain, and behavior two comprised a population. Let's treat you as a population. What if do you think I'd get a better survey result if I interrogated, if I gave a survey to just one practical class, or to the entire group of mind, brain, behavior 2 students minus a practical class? You'd get a more accurate picture of what the overall population of mind, brain, and behavior 2 felt about any given issue with a larger sample, wouldn't you? It just makes sense. Now, what Charmaine is actually asking there is a really interesting question, because, Charmaine, there are things that you will learn about in future statistics and research methods study in psychology where we can effectively approximate the types of conclusions that we could draw from a really large sample by inspecting what was found in multiple samples and across multiple studies. This is where we'd think about what's called meta-analysis, looking to derive a single conclusion about the statistical qualities of something based upon not just one large sample, but upon many different studies that might have used different sample, many small samples, for example, samples of varying sizes. For the purposes of this year, when we think about central limit theorem, distributions of sample means, and so forth, think about bigger sample equals more accurate estimate of the population parameter, the mean, for example. And that was another question I got emails about, or maybe I answered on Piazza just before. It was a couple of questions about what parameters and statistics are. So when we talk about the descriptive characteristics of a sample, and we talk about the mean, the median, mode, standard deviation, and so forth, we're talking about statistics, sample statistics. When we talk about population, the population instead, and those concepts of the mean and so forth, what we're talking about we call population parameters. So it's just that when we talk about things like the mean in terms of the population, we use the term parameter. Population parameter, sample statistics, the same concepts, but just relating to a sample or a population. And so therefore, quantitatively speaking around inferential statistics, we're always wanting to infer population parameters based on sample statistics. Hope that helps. Pardon me. Yeah, David is pretty cool, isn't he? Yuan. I quite like David. All right, let's have a look here. Super impressed by the knowledge out there around research design and statistical procedures accompanying research designs. Really well done, guys. Very impressed by that. Here's a good question. Lou asks, do we need to have Zoom on during the exam? And Jeffrey's actually already answered this. No, you don't need to have Zoom on during the exam. Of course, no sharing questions, though. Mama's on to you. Mama's got the voodoo. Any precautions with technical difficulties? Oh, yeah. So good question. So Matt's asked a question here about the implications, the technical implications of having, a couple of thousand students all submitting at the same time. It's completely fine. It's been capacity tested. It's a-okay. We had, I think, 3 technical hitches in the first semester exam, and I was out there. I got an alert as soon as the glitch happened, and what happened was that the internet actually went out in somewhere. Anyway, we sorted it out. It's fine. No, you don't need to worry about it. Turn it in. Not turn it in. Canvas has got the capacity to handle 2,000 students submitting at once and many more. Piece of cake. And should a technical issue occur, just like with first semester, I will be providing you with the contact details of the student IT support that you will be able to contact on the day during the exam if anything happens. And don't worry, if something happens during the exam, it will all work out. We will work it out one way or another. Right, now we're running out of time, so there is just a couple of things that I wanted to mention. Obviously, I mentioned that we've got more streams coming, and that is true. So we will be holding another stream next Monday, Tuesday, at the very least. Maybe even this Friday. We'll see what the appetite is. Now, I think we'll aim for next Tuesday again. And I will advertise the time for that very shortly. But what I won't do is circulate the link. Something's going on with me in YouTube. Every time I set up a stream ahead of time and then go to start it up, for some reason it doesn't like my new camera and it spits me back out, as we've all seen. So I will, for the next stream, advertise or circulate the link just as I'm about to go live. But I'll let you all know about that with in due course. What else did I want to tell you? I'm sure there's many things that I'm not thinking of right now. What's Jesse asking here? Would the practice test only have 20 questions like last time? Yeah, that's right. So each lecturer is giving me 5 questions from their section. And again, it's designed to just give you a sense of what it's like to sit the exam through the quiz function on Canvas. All of the lecturers will give you other practice questions. And of course, there is Peerwise as well. Kate Smith, in the exam, do we need to know how to interpret the output of a t-test? Maybe. I will clarify that at the next stream next week. Ask me that again, Kate, in 1 week's time after I've written the exam. I think that'd be fair. That'd be fair, wouldn't it? Especially after I've shown you how to do it. Thanks, Kate. Okay. So a stream in a week's time. In the meantime, now that I know Piazza is not emailing me, I'll be checking in there more regularly. So please feel free to drop me a line there and say hi in Piazza. Don't forget to do REP if you have not done your REP yet. There's 5% credit there to be earned, and there's still studies available if you would like to participate in REP. If you have not completed your assignment yet, please send me an email. We can work it out, but it's getting long in the day now. So, if you haven't submitted your assignment, please contact me as soon as possible so that we can discuss and work out a solution. Sorry, what assignment? The lab report, Mustafa. If you haven't done the lab report, please let me know. If you haven't done the assessment literacy module, which I know a lot of people didn't do before the lab report, so there's about 30% of students haven't done the assessment literacy module yet. You're not going to be able to pass Mind, Brain, and Behavior 2 until that's been ticked off in Grade Center. So if you haven't done that already, put that on your list of things to complete before the end of semester. That's what I mean. All right. So I think that's it from me. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in, and thanks for your patience with the technical difficulties as well. And I will look forward to seeing you again very soon, and hopefully with better bandwidth than this pixelated situation right now. Take care, everyone. Have a lovely week. Take some time out to look after yourself and enjoy the break from tutorials this week, and keep an eye out for that brief little video and self-guided exercise around using JASP to do t-tests and correlations on your assignment data. All right, everyone, take care, and I will see you very soon. Bye now.